I'm sorry, I knocked myself off air. But anyways, we're talking about the Symbionese Liberation Army. If you don't know what the Symbionese Liberation Army is, it was basically a I don't want to call them urban guerrillas. I'd much rather call them a bunch of psychos because that's essentially what they were. They were founded by a guy named Donald DeFreeze. Um, his cadre name, his pen name, his name of war, whatever the fuck you want to call him, was Sinke Mtume. And as I explained earlier, before I so rudely knocked myself off the air by hitting the space bar, um, he had a pretty fucked up upbringing. But the SLA is probably most renowned for abducting a rich white woman, Patty Hearst. And Patty Hearst is important because their abduction of her sort of sealed their fate because you cannot just snatch up a rich white woman and try to, I guess, brainwash her into some sort of weird ass wacko pseudo revolutionary cultist. But that's what DeFreeze and his crew tried to do. So this was a mostly white group. I think there was one Chicano. I don't think there are any other black people in this group other than DeFreeze. But yeah, basically a bunch of rich white idealists that fancied themselves communists, but they ended up falling under the wing of an unprincipled and outright loony cult leader. Yes, I did disconnect for a second. It was an accident on my part. But um, so they kidnapped Patty Hearst, and Patty Hearst went from spoiled, rich, bratty white girl to this.
I want to talk about the way I knew our 6 murdered comrades, because the fascist pig media has, of course, been painting a typically distorted picture of these beautiful sisters and brothers. Q loved the people with tenderness and respect.
It's not SIGQ, it's SIGK. They didn't even give these people they didn't even give this girl a fucking education on how to pronounce Africanized names correctly.
He helped me see that it's not how long we live that's important.
Cult shit.
It's how we live. Jelena was beautiful. She exploded with a desire to kill the pig. She taught me how to fight the enemy within.
That's their symbol. It is a 7-headed cobra.
Through her constant struggle with bourgeois conditioning.
AKA her success at brainwashing.
Gabi practiced until her shotgun was an extension of her right and left arms. She taught me the patience and discipline necessary for survival and victory. Zoya, female gorilla, perfect love and perfect hate reflected in stone-cold eyes. Faiza was a beautiful sister who taught me to shoot first and make sure the pig is dead before splitting.
So yeah, there's nothing about linking up with the masses. There's nothing about organizing the people for revolution. It's just all about killing and death.
I'll always love her. Cujo was the gentlest, most beautiful man I've ever known. Neither Cujo or I had ever loved an individual the way we loved each other. Our relationship's foundation was our commitment to the struggle and our love for the people. It's because of this that I still feel strong and determined to fight.
So how was the SLA taken down? It's a pretty funny story. They had absolutely atrocious security culture. Like the only reason that they had been able to avoid getting caught before was sheer luck. Like one of these cadres, I don't even want to call them cadres, one of these lunatics named Tico, that was his cadre name, uh, they decided to go to a sporting goods store to purchase more ammunition. And Tico decided that he wanted to shoplift a pair of socks. So the guy Tico was stopped by the security guard, who did not like the fact that he had tried to steal a pair of socks from this sporting goods store. And in retaliation, Tico pulled his gun. And if I recall correctly, Patty Hearst, aka Tanya, pulled out her rifle and shot up the entrance of the sporting goods store. So this attracted much police attention. There was a chase, and eventually they had to decamp from the apartment that they were living in at the time. And they ended up in a working class, lumpen black neighborhood. And in this working class black neighborhood, they forced their way into this woman's house and basically held the woman and her friend hostage for several hours. The cops came, evacuated the block, cordoned off the neighborhood. So already you could tell that these people had not read much on guerrilla warfare, because a good guerrilla knows that you do not hole yourself up in a house where you can be easily surrounded and isolated. But that is what the SLA did. And long story short, there was a shootout, and they all, well, a substantial chunk of them, just named by Patty Hearst and this weird tape, ended up burning to death. I recall they found DeFreeze burned to a crisp in the crawl space of the house that they had taken over. So, nasty way to go. So what was their line? What was their ideology? This is one of their communiques. This was the Declaration of Revolutionary War and the Symbionese Program. The Symbionese Federation and the Symbionese Liberation Army is a united and federated grouping of members of different races and people and socialist political parties of the fascist United States of America. I think they had one guy who had been in Venceremos, who have, under black and minority leadership, formed and joined the Symbionese Federated Republic and have agreed to struggle together in behalf of all their people and races and political parties' interests, indicating a freedom and self-determination and independence for all their people and races. The Symbionese Federation is not a government, but rather it is a united and federated formation of members of different races and people and political parties who have agreed to struggle in a united front for the independence and self-determination of each of their races and people and the liquidation of the common enemy. The Symbionese Federation is not a party, but rather it is a federation, for its members are made up of members of all political parties and organizations and races of all the most oppressed people of this fascist nation, thereby forming unity and the full representation of the interests of all people. It seems like a great value version of the Rainbow Coalition. I don't know. It seems like something written by somebody who skipped their Haldol shot. The SLA has no political power or political person over it that dictates who will fight and die if needed for the freedom of our people and children, but does not risk their life or fight too for our freedom, but rather the SLA is both political and military, and that in the SLA, the army officer, whether female or male, is also the political officer. So it's just like a bootleg version of the militarization of the party. Wait, they're not a party. And they both are the daughters and sons of the people, and they both fight as well as speak for the freedom of our people and children. The Symbionese Federation and the SLA is made up of the aged, youth, women, and men of all races of people. And it goes on and on and on and on and on. And it wraps up. And hereby offer to all liberation movements, revolutionary workers groups, and political people's organizations our total aid and support for the struggle for freedom and justice for all people and races. We call upon all revolutionary black and other oppressed people within the fascist United States to come together and join the Symbionese Federation and fight in the forces of the SLA. Live symbiotically. Remember the LA massacre of May 17th. So even by the standards of the mid 70s, well, early 70s, this was put out in the summer of 73. Like, this shit is fucking crazy. Like, these are the types of people who would kidnap a rich heiress and not know what to do with her. I found this interesting, sort of nutty, but it's interesting, breakdown of the SLA and its history. So, this guy, Jimmy Falun Gong, put out an SLA timeline. In 1970, DeFries was sent to Vacaville prison. In 72, he was transferred to Soledad. That is the same prison where George Jackson was murdered. In 73, DeFries escaped Soledad. Escape is in scare quotes here. In 73, they murdered Marcus Foster. Who is Marcus Foster? He was an educator. He was the Oakland school superintendent. So this guy, Robert Blackburn, escaped this shooting, but he has the appointment book and he has the overcoat. The appointment book saved his life because it was so thick. But yeah, they basically shot up his school board meeting. So November 6th, 1973, the Symbionese Liberation Army made its entrance on the world stage of revolutionary groups. And the article goes on to say, even though it would turn out they were simply a gang of thugs. For the next 23 months, the gang tried desperately to outshoot, outhype, and out-kidnap everybody else in the theater. Election Day 73 was the day the SLA murdered Marcus Foster, the respected black superintendent of Oakland schools, and nearly killed Blackburn, Foster's deputy superintendent, as they walked towards Blackburn's car at dusk after a school board meeting. Blackburn says they stood over Marcus Foster and put another round in his head. So, cold-blooded execution. The Black Panther Party basically thought that the SLA, after doing this, was like the CIA or the feds in general. Because, like, I think it was Elaine Brown who said that, like, that's not how revolutionaries act. They also tipped their bullets with cyanide. They shot him with a shotgun, and they had their pistol bullets tipped with cyanide. Yeah. And then they started robbing banks. They killed a housewife, Myrna Lee Opsahl, during a bank robbery. And they all recently started getting arrested. By recently, I mean like 20 years ago. So this article is from 2002. But like a lot of fugitives from the 70s and the 60s, like they went underground. They lived underground for 30 years, but they all started coming in from the cold in the late 90s, early 2000s. That's what the SLA did. And weather actually like turned themselves in way back in the 70s, like right after they got done doing this shit. Cyanide, what the fuck, that's sadistic. Yeah, these people were fucking nuts. Even Blackburn says these were not political radicals. They were uniquely mediocre and stunningly off base. The people of the SLA had no grounding in history. They swung from the world of being thumb-in-the-mouth cheerleaders to self-described revolutionaries with nothing but rhetoric to support them. Why did the SLA kill a popular black school administrator? Well, because the top school official had, in their view, supported a program that would require ID cards for all high school students. But Foster did not support the program. So they kind of broke the Maoist dictum, no investigation, no right to speak, never mind shoot, with cyanide-tipped bullets. And apparently they decided to make everybody forget about Foster by kidnapping Hearst and turning her into a counter-revolutionary zombie. 2 members of the SLA, Joseph Ramiro and Russell Little, were arrested after a shootout with the police in 1974 and charged with Foster's murder. Ramiro is serving a life sentence in Pelican Bay. After a successful appeal, Little was retried and acquitted. A third shooter, suspected to be SLA leader DeFries, a.k.a. Cinque Mtume, fired 2 rounds of buckshot into Blackburn. Each buckshot shell contains 9 lead pellets, and each pellet is about 1/3 of an inch in diameter. Blackburn, the guy who lived, had 23 entry and exit wounds. DeFries would later die in a fiery shootout with LA police in May 1974. So, yeah. Nutty people. So, back to Jimmy's breakdown. 74, a shootout killed most of SLA. There was a second bank robbery in 75. Hearst was arrested, aka rescued, and others flee abroad. The guy that they were talking about in that previous article, I think they found him in South Africa. So the group was active for less than 2 years, and other than themselves, they killed like less than 5 people, possibly only 2. This is a San Francisco Chronicle article about like what happened to them. Horrible way to die. They basically burned to death. So this is Cinque, a pretty handsome dude. He could have got it. He came from an abusive home. His father broke his arms 3 times. As a young adult, he married an older woman with previous children, and he struggled to support him. The stress was so much that he said, I just couldn't take it anymore. I was slowly becoming a nothing. He sought to escape in one of his fixations, guns and weapons of all types. He kept getting arrested for stupid shit like having a sawed-off shotgun, or firing rifles in his basement, or walking around with a grenade in public. One prison shrink wrote that DeFries had a schizoid personality with strong schizophrenic potential. I mean, if you're walking around with a fucking grenade, you kind of go past schizo potential. But, yeah. Basically a black Charlie Manson wannabe. So, long revolutionary history thingy. This guy apparently believes that that this is the response. This is the work of some sort of like, I don't know, MK Ultra type thing. So during this time period, there were a lot of psychological experiments that were being conducted on prisoners. Operation Phoenix played a heavy role in that. Like, they were basically conducting Operation Phoenix on people in the United States. Mind control, population removal, all sorts of nutty shit. So the inmates were fed Prolexin. Apparently DeFries took part in one of these fucking experiments, and they were given these types of drugs. Prolixin. It was described as sheer torture as well as being a zombie and liquid shock treatment. Prolixin was injected into Vacaville prisoners a staggering 1,093 times in 1970. Electroshock was administered 500 times in 71. Other inmates at Vacaville said of DeFries said that he did not have a strong sense of political ideology, and he did not use contemporary Marxist-Leninist language, and did not get involved in any public political activities. So this guy is basically an apolitical nut, and then he supposedly escapes and starts a Marxoid, whatever you want to call it, cult that shoots the black and popular Oakland school superintendent in the back with cyanide-tipped bullets, and calls himself Field Marshal Cinque Ntume. Westbrook bribed and groomed DeFries into becoming politically engaged. Westbrook encouraged DeFries to participate more fully in the BCA, the Black Cultural Association. He gave him the Africanized name Cinque. But even that was a ruse. Cinque organized a slave revolt on the Spanish ship La Amistad, the guy that he named himself after. On the surface, the name seemed heroic and noble. But historically, after a trial in New Haven that freed the captives, Cinque returned to Africa and enslaved and traded members of his own race. That was an L. So, In the midst of the fiercest repression of the BPP and other radicals by law enforcement, the Venceremos organization is allowed to visit and interact with black inmates. So again, we're supposed to believe that the SLA was formed out of the prison, basically creating black radicals and allowing them to form networks with Chicano and white radicals on the outside. If you've done any real prison organizing, you know that that's insane. It's quite a bit to think about. Hearst was already a closet radical, or at least got her rocks off with it. So let's talk about the SLA's ideology. Right off the bat, it's a seven-headed snake. And yes, it was directly inspired by Kwanzaa, with each head representing a different principle, itself calling back to Indian, Sri Lankan, Naja. So right off the bat, you know it's not a real Marxist organization because it's not named either some iteration of Red Army or, my favorite, just naming your org after some particular date. Funny. Jesus, he just said it. He wrote this stuff. Like, this is probably the longest fucking Twitter thread I've seen forever. In forever. So let's see who these people were. Regarding DeFreeze's time in the BCA, he had a big bottle of Efferol. They used this drug on the inside for thought control. But Don was taking these pills of his own free will like candy. This guy is fucking nuts. So, who did they have? Like, what was the makeup of the organization? What types of people joined this thing? Two of the members came from Indiana, Bill and Emily Harris. Bill was a Marine in Vietnam who experienced a 180-degree turn in his worldview after the military, or maybe he didn't. Joe Ramiro was in the 101st Airborne Division, which did search and destroy missions in Quang Ngai Province. It was the same area where the My Lai massacre occurred. He was absolutely doing the same shit. Nancy Ling Perry was a Barry Goldwater supporter and was in the Job's Daughters org before her illustrious career in the SLA. So Jimmy thinks that half of the SLA were operatives. DeFreeze escapes from Soledad in March of 73. They basically let him walk out, and unlike virtually all the walkouts, DeFreeze actually makes it to the Bay Area, where he goes underground. The first thing he does, a few leftist groups in the Bay Area were approached by DeFreeze shortly after he escaped from Soledad. DeFreeze startled them by offering his services as a hitman or a contract killer or, entrapment. A number of these radical organizers had their suspicions about DeFreeze, and one person said he came on so heavy that he might be a provocateur. So, luckily, DeFreeze was as bad a fake terrorist as he was a fake Black Panther and CI. There's a wanted poster for him. He was wanted for bank robbery, interstate flight, possession of homemade bomb, robbery, receiving stolen property, assault with force. These are the weathermen. I think this was during the days of rage. 60s were wild, man. Look at him. You got this dude just standing in the front of a fucking football helmet. Foster was an interesting target. This was the guy they killed because he had the support of the community, the school system, and the Black Panthers. In fact, the last bit might have been half the reason he was targeted. Another reason is because Westbrook hated Foster. The SLA's Foster communique included the claim that Foster and Blackburn represent the rich ruling class of big business and not the children and youth of the community. The editors in Ramparts, a very well-known leftist magazine, said that the act itself was so brutal, so morally unjustifiable, and so politically incomprehensible that most Bay Area radicals assumed the SLA to be a cover for some right wing or police group. And they also used hollow point bullets that were packed with cyanide. So, yeah, loopy shit. So, to apparently make them forget about that, they kidnapped Patty Hearst. And they shook down her family and made them give out food to the community. Jim Jones, who most people also think is an op, interjected himself into the kidnapping slash food program narrative by expressing admiration for the SLA and distributing the SLA's manifesto among the members of the People's Temple. So remember when I was talking about Maupin and the LaRouchites and Black Hammer and how all of these groups support each other? So you've got the guy who literally invented the term "don't drink the Kool-Aid," supporting the Symbionese Liberation Army. So you've got him in his very 70s fit, and he also expressed a desire to target Randolph Hearst because he represented capitalist society. A police report contained an analysis of press photos and determined that SLA leader Donald DeFreeze and SLA member Nancy Ling Perry attended various temple meetings along with Hearst's boyfriend, Stephen Weed. Stephen Weed. So, yeah, they all hung out with this guy at People's Temple, the guy who literally invented the term, "don't drink the Kool-Aid." Here they all are. Big, happy family. So, the food program that they shook out of the Hearsts. The SLA demanded that the Hearst Corporation undertake a massive food distribution program throughout California as a condition of the release of the kidnapped Harris. Hearst agreed and threw together an effort that by February 22nd made its first distribution limited to San Francisco. It was a disorganized disaster. Scores of people were injured as panicked workers threw boxes of food off moving trucks as huge crowds of people unexpectedly showed up for the food. The size of the crowds shocked the media and so upset Governor Ronald Reagan that he stated, "It's just too bad we can't have an epidemic of botulism." So this guy was so fucking evil. First of all, this was the guy that supported and signed the Mulford Act, which effectively disarmed the Black Panthers in public. Now here he is hoping that poor people get botulism. If you voted for Ronald Reagan, if you supported Ronald Reagan, you have to be a racist or a knuckle top. The SLA issued a communique the next day demanding that a community coalition be put in charge of the effort under the leadership of a small community-based organization called the WAPAC, Western Addition Project Area Committee. Hearst's agreement to distribute food was condemned by the establishment and viewed with suspicion by the clean hands left. He was seen as giving it to terrorists and was shunned by local, state, and national officials. There was no Red Cross, no United Way offers of help, just agents, cops, and ops of every sort watching. The easy chair Bay left feared that the SLA was a police front, which it probably was, and in its usual Berkeley bullshit manner, remained aloof. So the operation was centered at the huge China Basin building on Townsend Street. Scores of trucks were coming and going every hour. Father and brother Hearst were there 24 hours a day, talking on the phone, fending off self-serving promoters and hustlers, and forced by food suppliers and distributors to pay top dollars. It was an eye-opener for the community folks. Capitalists will compete to sell rope to hang one another. Slowly, community coalition members took over the operation and earned Hearst's trust and respect. So, at least something decent came out of this. So what exactly were they fighting for? They have a list of 16 goals. 1. To unite all oppressed people into a fighting force and to destroy the system of the capitalist state and all of its value systems. 2. To assure the rights of all people to self-determination and the rights to build their own nation and government. 3. To build a People's Federated Council, who will be a male and female of each People's Council. I'm sorry, I was reading some moron in my chat. Or sovereign nation of the Symbionese Federation of Nations, who shall be the representatives of their nations in the forming of trade pacts, and unified defenses against any external enemy that may attack any of the free nations of the Federation and form other aids to each other's needs. To place the control of all the institutions and industries of each nation into the hands of its people. To aid and defend the cultural rights of all the sovereign nations of the Symbionese Federation. This sounds like some fucking Star Trek shit. Like, this is absolutely, like, who wrote this? Like, this has to have been written in a CIA facility somewhere. Like, it's like if you just Googled leftism and cobbled together some shit in 15 seconds. That's what this reads like. There's no ideological consistency or anything. So, obviously, like, if you were around back then and you were a serious leftist, you would not take this shit seriously. So, they kidnapped Patty Hearst in February of 1974. They locked her in a closet. They locked her in a closet and let her out in April, where she joined the SLA. She began calling herself Tanya after the girlfriend of Cuban revolutionary leader Che Guevara, and is photographed holding a rifle during a robbery of the Hibernia Bank branch in San Francisco. So you lock somebody in a closet, it's probably going to make them kind of loopy. I don't agree that she was like a closet radical or anything like that. I think she was just a spoiled, inert, rich girl that that had her brain fucked with. So, 6 of them died in a shootout and fire that burned up the place where they're hiding. Like, they basically destroyed this lady's house. Hearst and Bill and Emily Harris escaped because they had been stopped at a store for shoplifting. The Harrises eventually served 8 years in prison for kidnapping Patty Hearst. So they robbed the bank in April of 1975. Myrna Opsahl is killed during a robbery of the Crocker National Bank in Carmichael near Sacramento. Hearst is captured by the FBI in San Francisco on September 18, 1975. She is convicted of robbing the bank. Steven Scalia is acquitted on charges related to the robbery in Carmichael. And Jimmy Carter commuted her sentence. So even when you're a criminal, it's good to be rich. So this is reconstructed footage showing her at the bank. That does not look like a very organized robbery. Like, these people are fucking amateurs. Look at him, just fucking milling around with fucking bell bottoms on. You gotta love the 70s. Oh, yeah, that's that. So, the last statement was issued in July of 1976 by William Harris. I think his cadre name was Tico. The long-run aim of the SLA was to work towards the annihilation of U.S. imperialism and the culture and institutions that support it. The building of the People's Army wasn't seen as an end, but as a means to achieve popular freedom, to build a society that was free of racism, sexism, and classism, a society where there were no elites, no oppressive bureaucracy. So these people were politically all over the place. The SLA wanted to remain relatively small, develop their skills, set up networks in various West Coast cities, and gradually refine their political perspective as conditions changed. They would test out their theories through guerrilla action, probing the enemy's weak spots, analyze the attitudes of people in their communities as to what would be acceptable actions to take. So they wanted to do mass work, but they didn't do mass work. It checked their ultimate response in order to refine tactics, techniques, and overall strategy. Let's see how that resulted.
That White House with the two windows that I have.
That's bad. That's bad. Stay over there. Stay on the side of the street.
To come down because we're going to have to
Somebody slide left, please. They're moving us back. They're moving us back.
This was right at the time when the technology changed in television. I mean, as far as I know, this is the first time, something like that wasn't a planned event. It was actually carried live nationwide. I mean, the whole world is watching this shootout.
40 days, that's what's enough, because we're going to need your assistance. Now, we need all the ammo that we've got in the safe. We're taking automatic fire front and back from this location. They're much better armed than we are.
We have more ammunition than the police do, which is an incredible thing. It's hard to believe. But that was the transmission. So there's no reason to believe we're going to be able to get loose here for a while. We're going to be stuck. We're going to be pinned down here for a long time.
So just to recap, this was basically the beginning of the end for them. They robbed another bank, and then they all ended up getting arrested or fleeing into exile. So what exactly did the SLA accomplish besides bogarting a free food program out of Patty Hearst's family? Like, nothing. They accomplished nothing. Like, it was just a conga line of fail. This guy broke out of jail after being fucking brainwashed by CIA drugs. He got together a bunch of equally fucked up white people. And, yeah, they played with guns. They locked Patty Hearst in a closet. They robbed 2 banks and shot a guy in the back of the head. And then they all got murked in a shootout. Well, most of them got murked in a shootout. Then two of the morons tried to steal a pair of socks and shot up the sporting goods store and ended up getting arrested. And then Patty Hearst was arrested and sent to prison and then pardoned by Jimmy Carter because her daddy was very, very rich. So, what is the lesson here? Just because a dude comes along talking a bunch of militant radical shit, that doesn't mean that you should follow said dude. It means that you should organize, link up, unite with the masses, so this does not be the fate that befalls you. This is not the fate that you want to befall you. Okay? This is a horrible, horrible way to die. So, if you do not want to die in this horrible, horrible way, avoid people like Cinque and Tume. Comrade Nate is wrapping us up with play stupid games, win stupid prizes. Don't win stupid prizes. Win good prizes.